Hi everyone, hope you're keeping safe, hope you're keeping sane. If you're watching this video and if you're a member of this channel, subscriber to this channel, then you don't really need me to tell you about the dangers of gambling. There's a good chance that either you or someone you know is suffering the repercussions of a gambling addiction in their day-to-day lives. However, what we don't understand sometimes is quite how we manage to get ourselves in the situations we do when we're in the midst of this addiction. It's fairly safe to say that whilst gambling is a recognised addiction, whilst it's a recognised medical condition, and there is a chemical imbalance which causes said addiction, it is still very much on us to control it. It's still our responsibility to do something to try and control this addiction. We, whether it's conscious or subconscious, we make the decision to gamble without a gun being held to our head. We make the decision to have that first bet. We make that decision to put the first note in the machine or make that first deposit at the online casino. Nobody has a gun held to our heads. We choose to do it, despite knowing historically what that's likely to do, how that's likely to snowball, and the damage that that is likely to cause. So why do we continue to make the same mistake over and over again? And it feels like a while since I said this, but bear in mind that nothing I say comes from any position of a high horse. It's all based on my experiences and the mistakes I made for many, many, many years. Well, the reason we choose to do that first thing, that first bet, that first deposit, that first note in the machine, is exactly that reason. It's the first one. We conclude that we can have that first thing, even though we know historically the repercussions of doing that. It's akin to an alcoholic who has acknowledged and accepted that they are an alcoholic having that first drink. The first drink doesn't cause any damage. The first drink is not going to be of any significant harm to that person. However, it's the door that opens and the subsequent loss of control that ends up causing the damage. In the same way that that first note in the machine or that first small deposit at the online casino, which you can afford, opens the door to the absolute carnage that ensues afterwards. So why do we continue to make this same mistake? And the reason we continue to make the same mistake is because inherently recovery from gambling addiction and basically abstaining from gambling is a battle of two sides of your mind. You have the conscious rational side of your mind which knows that you're a gambling addict, knows that you shouldn't gamble and knows the damage it causes you. And then you have the part of your brain which feeds the addiction, the actually addictive part of your brain. And I often sort of personify that as some form of creature or some form of monster that loiters at the back of your head waiting to pounce. Now, if when we were making the rational decision as to whether or not to have that first bet, we could see the monster in all its hideousness, we could see the size of the threat, we knew just what we were up against if we decided to sort of take this monster on, then there's no way we would ever risk in our conscious mind having that first gamble. However, this addiction is incredibly dangerous because it's devious. That monster will not masquerade as a monster when we're not gambling. That monster will only become the monster once we start. Before we start gambling, before we have that first bet, that monster appears relatively docile. It appears like a bit of harmless fun. It masquerades as something that we can do and that our conscious decision-making mind, the conscious part of our mind, doesn't really have anything to fear. We believe that we can control this monster, which means the battle between the conscious mind, the logical, rational part of your mind, and the monster is a foregone conclusion. We can do this. We can control this. Look, the monster is only small. It doesn't have any control over me. It won't beat me. I can take it on. No problems at all, and I will win. It's only, however, when you get into battle with your addiction that it takes its disguise off and you can see this monster for what it is. And as you feed it, it grows and it grows and it grows until it gets out of control and it becomes all-consuming. Now, this all sounds great on paper, so how do we control it? Well, firstly, we don't feed the monster. All right, we need to rationalise this decision-making process when it comes to having that first bet. We need to look at and acknowledge, because we're very, very good as addicts of sweeping the past under the carpet and going, this time will be different. We have to look back and acknowledge the amount of times we have told ourselves that this time will be different and the amount of times that this time actually ever turned out to be anything other than the same. We also need to, and again it's something I've always harped on about in the past, but we need to protect ourselves from that monster. And if we can't rely, and I don't ever suggest we completely rely on our conscious decision-making brain, we don't ever rely on the rational part of our brain, and we certainly don't rely solely on willpower to beat the monster, we equip the rational part of our brain. We equip our sensibilities, and we equip the fact that we know we have this addiction with as many defences, many form of defence or attack even, as we can. And that comes in all the forms of all the blocks and everything else that I've spoken about in the past. It's been a while, so just to recap what I think are the most effective ones. Firstly, and this is often the hardest to do, but I think it's by far and away the most effective, and that is handing control of your finances over to a loved one or someone who you trust. Okay, and if you don't want to hand control of your finances over to them, then allow them access to see what you're spending your money on. One way you can do this is to have your account, your bank account, as a joint account, or have notifications go to your partner or whatever whenever you spend money. This means you are immediately accountable, you're immediately answerable to any transaction on that card. If you're going out and you're spending money on regular everyday things, or even extravagant things like going out with your mates or going to the pub, then you can explain that away. However, if random cash withdrawals show up on there, or deposits to online casinos or whatever, then you know that you'll be answerable to the person that hopefully you've already spoken to about your addiction. But if you don't want to do that, or if you've done that and actually want to put a second level of security on there, which I strongly recommend you do, then look at other ways you can block yourself. Now, typically this used to be personal self-exclusion from places like bookmakers and casinos. You would go in, you'd fill in a form, give them a couple of photos, and you would then be banned from that premises, and I believe most of those still do that. However, there's also a nationwide self-exclusion scheme, and you can sign up to that online. There'll be a link in the description below. If most of your gambling is done online, be that in the form of sports betting or horse racing, something like that, or if it's at the online casinos, then you can use a service such as GamStop. This is highly effective and will restrict your ability and basically nullify your ability to gamble online in any capacity, and that includes things such as that seem quite nebulous, like the lottery. Equip yourself with whatever you can do to help defend yourself against the monster, because there will be times where that monster looks so harmless. It looks like it's going to just, you can beat it. You can stop it at any time. You can control this monster. It's only tiny. But once you start feeding it, once you start engaging with it, it will reveal its true colours and it will eat you alive. I hope that analogy makes some sense. Like I say, it's very, very easy to think we have control over this. And it's very easy to think, particularly as time passes during recovery, that we can do this in a moderate, controlled way. But just understand that monster is waiting there for you. It's waiting there for you to start to feed it, and it will overpower you and it will take everything you've got. So please, stay safe, stay sane, and I'll speak to you all soon. Take care, guys.